Hello and welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical trivia and tabletop role-playing settings. This episode, Curdling Magic. Very early in the history of Ars Magica, it was established that many of the cursed items which characters might find were produced by a single magician called Hymnus the Mad. Later, Hymnus was seen as the founder of a small tradition of Verditus Magi who, for some reason, use the limited time of their life to create magic items which harm their users. Why cursed items exist at all is unclear in Ars Magica. They exist in Dungeons and Dragons to make treasure a sort of mini-game where you ensure that it's not poisoned or trapped. In Ars Magica, traps and poisons and similar things work far more directly. And the philosophy of the game concerning mind control is far different. So if you attempted to pull the thing from early Dungeons and Dragons where your character, by picking up a sword, loses their mind such that they must always use this sword even though it causes them disadvantage in their character's main ability, which is fighting, then that would be seen as particularly bad story design. Generally, if a troupe has accepted a character, the story guide shouldn't go out of their way to nerf that character's main abilities. And yet, we have cursed items. Before the Order of Hermes supplement, there was some question as to how large the order was. It set the size of the order as about 1,000 people. Before that, when the order might conceivably have been as small as just the characters and their antecedents, a single magician creating cursed items due to mental illness, another idea which has developed somewhat during the history of the game, could explain as many cursed items as the story guide required. Later, when the order became far larger and your character could have adventures set anywhere in Europe, it became troublingly difficult to explain how they kept running into material created by a single person, hence the lineage. Following the mysteries, the size of the order has, in some sagas at least, been radically increased so that there are sufficient magi to act as members for all of the various cults which characters may wish to join. It's difficult to see how a single magician, or even lineage of magicians, could find it useful to spend so much time creating cursed items. There is a way around this shortage for groups who think it necessary to have cursed items in their sagas, and I call it curdling magic. I first thought about curdling magic while listening to the tale of Daedalus and Icarus in the Myths and Legends podcast. It occurred to me that no matter what Daedalus did, eventually his invention or creation was used to cause him harm. You can build a labyrinth and you'll be locked into it. You can build mystical wings and they will kill your son. Certain of his earlier inventions had similar problems. Listening to this story of Daedalus, I thought, aha, this is where Hymnus the Mad gets his problems from. He is clearly a descendant. Then I thought, the problem with that is that it's not playable. No player would deliberately volunteer to play a Verditus Magus who spends all of his time creating machines that eventually kill him and destroy his family members. How could this be modified so that players would volunteer for their characters to spontaneously create cursed items? Now, my suggestion for that is as follows. There are two great points of unexpected failure with magic items. The first is in the extraordinary results chart for experimentation. Those of you using Ars Magica 5, it's on page 109. What I'd suggest is an extra entry into the extraordinary results chart, such that the item becomes cursed, harming the user, although not necessarily the magus making the item, and the easiest way to include it into the chart is by putting curdling into at least part of the no extraordinary effects area of the chart. I accept there's some overlap between the side effect result and the curdling result, however I believe that can be overlooked. Side effects seem different in theme to having an item which is cursed, or as I prefer to say, curdled, to suggest that the magic in it has gone awry rather than it's been deliberately designed to cause harm, as in an item that has actually been cursed, for example, by infernal powers. There used to be a flaw in earlier versions of Ars Magica, and I'm having difficulty recalling its name, that meant that the character's magical ability was linked to their life, and when they died, all of the magical items that they created and all of the spells which they had cast suddenly ceased to work. I presume this was removed from later editions because a flaw which is not a flaw is not a flaw, and it was an easy point for characters who didn't wish to leave that sort of mystical legacy. You could design a flaw that did something similar, that made all of the magic items created by a character into curdled item, and your way of upgrading it so that it became a playable flaw, that is something which had measurable impact on the game, would be, for example, that curdling was known to be heritable and that the character was aware that they had it, but they were being careful not to tell other people that they had this weakness, so it becomes the dark secret flaw. The generation of cursed items as a side effect of experimentation that the player knows going in when they choose to roll on the table for their character, or will occur because they have selected a flaw for their character during the design phase, don't have fairness issues, and by adjusting the likelihood of curdling in a particular saga, a troupe can emphasize or de-emphasize the availability of cursed items to suit their story's style.